I remember the first time I heard we were going to have a kid. And I remember the anticipation that came with that moment. We couldn't wait until our first was born. It seemed like forever. Doctor visit after doctor visit, we just wondered when. We knew the date, but it just seemed like time didn't go by as fast as we hoped. But then finally, the night came. Ironically enough, it came on Christmas Day. We sat in the hospital on Christmas Day, and then it was the day after Christmas our firstborn broke into the world and for the very first time breathed. And all of a sudden, it hit us both. Life was about to change. Change forever. Nothing would ever be the same again. Nothing for sure. Ironically enough, on that very same night, there was a tsunami across the globe. We wondered and worried that maybe that would have been a sign of what this first child was about to bring. Mostly it did. But by and large, it was a reminder that things would never be the same. Our first night after having our child, we learned really quickly that we wouldn't make it through the night asleep anymore, as the nurse came in and reminded us that that was our child crying in the middle of the night. We had to wake up and feed her and take care of her. We realized things had been altered. But as much as one child to two parents changes their life, a child in Nazareth changed reality. Because now the hope of Eden would be fulfilled. The promise to Abraham has come true. The line of David has been completed. That promise fulfilled. Christ is here. During the time of Jesus' birth, there was another king in the land. His name was Herod. Herod, we can look back and in the ancient world, in the lands where he lived, we can still see the remnants of his buildings, the ruins of his mighty structures. He was a good builder. Herod was a mighty, mighty king, full of power and authority, struck fear into the hearts of many. Nobody would cross Herod. One of his greatest structures he ever built was something called the Herodian. It was an enormous building. It was beautiful, it was ornate. He was his masterpiece. But not very far off, this great King Herod's greatest achievement was a little town called Bethlehem. Somewhere in that town, though we do not know where, there was a little stable or something of that nature. And though we can't point it out, we know somewhere in that little town, in some little stable that we can no longer find, there was a baby born, another king. And it's intriguing to me that two kings lived in that day. One king, mighty and powerful, we can still see the remnants and the ruins. We can hear the tales and the stories. And there's another king. He never left the building. We don't really know specifically any place that he walked. In fact, he left very little physically behind that we can recall or point our finger to. But that king didn't just change the landscape of an ancient world. He changed the world. That's the king we're anticipating at Advent. That's the king we're looking for. That's the king we worship. And as we prepare for Advent this year, let's put our minds and our hearts towards expecting this king, living as though he is reigning, living as though he is in control. Let's put our minds and our hearts and our thoughts in that one beautiful promise, that because he's come, nothing will ever be the same. And that's a good thing, because he's come, everything changes. And because of that, the hope that seemed yet so distant, in a world that seemed so confusing, in a future that seemed a little bit insecure, all of a sudden has all kinds of security, all kinds of hope, all kinds of joy. And for once, we can finally say that the King is here, Christ has been born, and because he is the King. And let's worship him this Advent season as though that's the fact. Let's live as though that's true. Let's live as though he is in fact reigning on high, because he is. And we are his children, announcing to the world